Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to Simon's New York Stories, the companion to Simon's Dive Bar and the Simon Chartier Show. So I'm going to talk a little about what I saw, which is not the whole picture, right? But through my eyes, how I saw the very early days of punk in New York, and how I finally, like, uh, moved over to the punk rock movement, which is actually a much better thing for me. I just, it kind of, I finally felt like I was in tune in the right, in a vibration with something, you know? So anyway, the first punk rock band I ever saw was the Electric Eels, and not the Electric Eels from Cleveland that had Nick Knox in it, but the Electric Eels that my friend Jerry Agony started this band. Jerry Agony also played in Richard Hell and the Voidoids. He's the bass player on Kid with the Replaceable Head. He also played in the Contortions for a long time. Actually played a gig with the Contortions and Jerry at CBGB's. Uh, and then he also was in his band, The Special Jellies. And unfortunately, we lost Jerry way too young. He passed away, and he was a year older than me. So I was in my first semester at high school of music and art, and me and Jerry became friends, and we had a lot in common in that we're both Cuban Americans, and also he lived on 93rd Street in West End Avenue, and when I was born, the first place I lived was 94th Street between West End and Riverside. And then later on, I lived in the back of my dad's doctor's office from age 17 to about age 20, and so I used to sleep on the floor in the back of my dad's doctor's office, which was great. So Jerry, we had a lot in common. We both had kind of, along with Craig Robeson, who played bass in the Bar Sinisters, we were all from the same block, and we were all really into music. So Jerry told me, "You got to come down and see my band. It's called the Electric Eels." So I did, and I couldn't believe what I saw. Here's these guys, and they got up, and they all had like 50s DA haircuts, slicked back with the grease, and I was like, the only person I ever saw with short hair that played rock and roll was John McLaughlin, but that's not really rock and roll. It's like jazz fusion. But like nobody that played rock and roll had short hair. It was all like the long hair thing, you know. And and they had short hair slicked back, and they were wearing like black pants and white dress shirts buttoned up tight with skinny ties and black jackets, kind of like. And I was like, holy shit! And they came out, and the way I would describe their sound all these years later is they sounded a lot like Television, if you've ever heard Television, and they sound a lot like Television, and they played at St. Bartholomew's Church on 53rd Street and Park Avenue, and St. Bart's used to let these bands come in and blast away in their rec room, and they would just I've seen a couple of other bands there, like a couple of like drug dealer hippie bands that hung out in Central Park, right? So this is before I started hanging out downtown or anything, right? So I was still like a, upper west side, upper east side, Harlem guy, right? Strictly. So I saw them and I was like, wow, that was pretty cool, right? So then I ran into this other guy, and I this other guy, Tom. Oh man, I wish I remembered his name, but he was in a band called the Miamis. And remember, I'm like 15 years old, but we were jamming. There was some big jam, and everybody was playing. And this guy came and he played piano, and he's really good. And we started talking. He invited me to see his band, the Miamis, and they were playing at this place, the Lower Manhattan Ocean Club. And I said, well, I'm too young to get into a bar, you know. like they wouldn't let me into Max's or anything like that, right? So he says, "Don't worry, I'll get you in. I'll get you in." And it was the Miami's opening up for Blondie. So this is like late '74, winter into '75 around then. So I saw Blondie, and I was like, "Wow!" And the Miami's, and to me, they both sounded like the surf music that I had grown up listening to in the 1960s. Like I remember in the 1960s, we used to go when I went to school, which wasn't much. I used to go to school, and they said, "When you're 18." You're going to go join the army and you're going to go to Vietnam and kill communists. This is what our teachers told us. Like our teachers were telling us to go kill communists. I was like, I don't know if I really want to kill a communist. You know, what happens if I want to be a fucking communist? What am I, you know? So anyway, which wound up, not being a communist either. But anyway, I seen them, right? And I was like, this sounds like surf music. We used to stand in between cars on Yellowstone Boulevard and wait for the Mr. Softy truck to come by. And we had our rifles because everything was war, join the army, Vietnam, you're going to go kill communists. And everybody was telling you, kill, kill, kill. This is like the 60s. And the Russians are going to bomb us. We had to get under our desks. So they were trying to fucking brainwash us to go kill commies, right? You know? And, meanwhile, I'm looking at the fucking numbers on the arms and the people in my building. I'm like, yo, politics is all a bunch of bullshit, man. Like just go kill somebody for what, right? So the Mr. Softy truck would come, and it's funny because now I'm still in Queens, and in the summer I'm still sitting around waiting for the fucking Mr. Softy truck in the summer. So nothing ever changes. It's like this thing runs through my life, right? So I seen Blondie and the Miamis and the Electric Eels. We're getting into '75. And so those are the first punk bands I saw. Then about a year later, it was like New Year's Eve. And, I didn't have a girlfriend. I had nothing to do. It was like all the guys that didn't have girlfriends, we would have these things we would call beermeister parties, where it was just all a bunch of us fucking low-life boys, and we would just drink really cheap, shitty beer and throw up. So we went New Year's Eve, '75, '76, to Central Park, and Blondie was playing in the Bethesda fountain, so I saw him a second time. So I was like, this sounds like surf music, like back in Queens. I used to listen to the Ventures. The older kids had the transistor radios. I didn't have one, but go we used to go, and the older kids had the radios and they would play. There was this one place, Knishnosh, on Queens Boulevard, and if you went there would be kids that had radios, and they'd all put the radios to the same station. So we'd all walk over to Queens Boulevard to listen to rock and roll and hang out in front of Knishnosh. And as a matter of fact, I just went to Knishnosh last autumn, and it was still really fucking good. So that's the early punk stuff I heard, right? So like then later, I started becoming aware of punk. I was pretty much like my high school was all jazz, and I was trying to learn jazz. I'm still trying to learn it. This is what I was just doing right now, practicing jazz. But I've always jazz is really hard. I still struggle with it, but I was trying to learn jazz, but I also really got into blues, and I really got into Hound Dog Taylor and Otis Rush, and those were the guys I was aware of back then. And of course, Little Walter, Muddy Waters, Chuck Berry, always dug that stuff. And I just didn't feel rock and roll was going anywhere. It was like Fleetwood Mac, Peter Frampton. Peter Frampton was good in Humble Pie. Humble Pie was like loud, screechy rock and roll, but I could never get into these '70s bands because they would always have like one good record that really rocked, or three. What they would do is every '70s band did this. They'd have two pretty good records, kind of. Then they would have this live record that usually really kicked ass, and then they would just go over into some commercial pop shit. And like I always wanted fucking rock and roll, Like I grew up with fucking Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs and the fucking Mysterians and shit like that, like the real shit. And I couldn't get into this whole like mellow kind of rock, and I was really lost. I was playing blues. I wound up while I was studying jazz and trying to learn jazz guitar and classical guitar, I wanted to play out, you know, I wanted to play out, and I got hooked up playing with this blues band of cats that were like 10 years older than me. And I learned a lot playing with them. The guy's name was Chance Wayne, and he was from Forest Hills also. But he was a pretty fucking amazing guitar player. He was like my hero, and I wound up playing in his band. And these cats were like 28, 29, and I was like 17. So it was very good education for me. So then I joined the Eddie D Orchestra, like we were talking about, and then I played in the Classics. That's the other like Italian American doo-wop band I played in. That that's where I got busted for writing graffiti. That story about me getting in jail behind graffiti. So while I'm on the road with the Classics, Terry played me the Sex Pistols, and I was like, holy shit, it sounds just like Chuck Berry, you know, and I, I really got into that. And then I ran into this guy, Enrico, who I used to hang out with in Central Park, and he told me, go see this band, Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers. Now, I'm still a hippie, right? I got long hair. I got like, I'm still dressed like a hippie. You know what I mean? I'm wearing like fucking painter's pants, and I'm wearing Adidas, you know, and or like blue jeans, you know, not black, no black clothes, all colors. And I'm playing blues, but I'm just still kind of like a, you know, lumping fucking 70s hippie. So they finally would let me in at Max's, right? Because I'm like, they finally would let me in. And I go and I have to wait around and wait around, you know, and then fucking Thunders comes on, the curtain goes back, and I'm like, holy shit. It was like this arrow got shot right through me. And then again, just like with the Pistols, it was like the Chuck Berry that I craved. You know what I mean? The rock and roll, that fucking beat, you know? Like the Pistols swung. They had the beat, man. The fucking, and it was like that raw rock and roll sound that I craved, that I could never get, I could never find. That's what Hound Dog Taylor had it. You know, I wanted to sound like fucking Hound Dog Taylor. You know, and then Johnny Thunders came out and said, he sounds like fucking Hound Dog Taylor when he plays guitar. I was like, and I liked that it was so non-slick. The first time I saw him, he fell off the fucking stage. He was so high. And then he got up and he just goes, I think I fell on my ass. And and I was like, wow, this is the shit. So I was like, wow, okay, Sex Pistols, so Thunders. So then now I'm playing in the Italian wedding band and I'm playing in the Classics. And I'm making a little money. I'm making like $50 a night playing. And I'm living in the floor of my dad's doctor's office. So, but I'm looking for another band. I was in the blues band and I got kicked out of the band because I got drunk and fell off the stage. So they didn't want me around no more. I was already like, you know, remember I had a serious drug problem by the time I was 15. And now I'm like 18 or something or 19. And I'm 19. I already had, you know, uh, I didn't even really have a girlfriend or any kind of, you know, or anything, but I was just a drug abuser and you know, I was trying to drink, but I can't drink. I can't hold my liquor, right? So they kicked me out of the blues band, so it was like humiliating, right? So like I'm looking for another band, and this band goes, "Oh, we're playing Southern rock. We're playing like Allman Brothers and Grateful Dead and stuff." And I'm still kind of, you know, half of me is checking out this new sound, Thunders. So from Thunders, I went back to the Dolls, and I was like, "Holy shit!" And then the Pistols, but I still was trying to, like, I was kind of drifting into that slow, but like I still had one foot in that fucking like stodgy ass, stale ass world of fucking classic rock that I've come to really fucking hate, right? So I see this ad in like New York Rocker or something like that, or Aquarian. They had all these little fish wrap papers about the rock scene. They had rock scene, New York Rocker, Aquarian, East Village Other. They had the Village Voice, and I used to answer all these ads and go out and audition for every band, which involved lugging a Gibson ES345 hollow body guitar and a Fender Deluxe amp on the fucking subway, just hard carrying it. So I did that a bunch of times. I was trying out for these bands, and I went to like fucking Park Slope. I went to fucking Flushing. I'm just looking for a band I can go out, play gigs, try to find a girlfriend. You know, I always wanted to have a girlfriend, and never did. Right? I mean, so uh, and I see this ad for this band, and it's in East New York, Brooklyn. It's in fucking Cypress. It's at Cypress Hill Street and Jamaica Avenue, if you know where that is. It's right when you come down Snake Hill from the cemetery, and now you're in East New York. And they said, come out there. We play like Southern rock. We play like Charlie Daniels Band and Marshall Tucker and Allman Brothers. I was like, I know all that shit. You know, I mean, I'm playing like Volare and Mala Femina and fucking and the fucking chicken dance. You know, I could play this shit. So I get on the fucking those old 1930s trains with the motors that went, and I go all the way from the Upper West Side down to like Chambers Street, and I change for the fucking J train. I take it all the way out there, right to East New York, and I go into this place, and it's like a catering hall, like where they have weddings and shit, but it's like not being used, and they let the band play there. And I go in, they've got this giant PA set up, those big PA bins they had back then in the 70s with the horns and shit, and like big stacks of Marshalls. Then the guy was like, "Where's your amp?" And I had my little deluxe amp that I carried on the train. He was like, "That's not an amp." I said, "Yeah, it's a Fender amp." And he goes, "You can't be in this band unless you have a 100-watt Marshall stack." And a 100-watt Marshall stack is like that big refrigerator size amp that all the rock stars used, And it's like, hey, I'm a fucking bum. I'm lucky I have this shit because my mother bought it for me. But like, I don't have a fucking 100-watt Marshall. No way. And they were like, I said, but hey, man, I could play. Can I try out for you guys? And there was like, there's no point in you even trying out if you don't have a Sunburst Gibson Les Paul and a 100-watt Marshall amp. There's no point in you even trying out in this band. You better leave. They kicked me out of the band. So I'm in East New York, and I had to go through like some neighborhoods that back then, and now they've been kind of classified. Like Giuliani, when he was the mayor, he just came in and broke everybody's fucking head and threw everybody in jail. But back then, it's before Giuliani, and those neighborhoods were pretty wild. I mean, not for nothing, but I was taking a little bit of a chance taking the train out there that somebody was going to see, this little white boy with a guitar and amp and try and rob me, which didn't happen. I've always had some pretty good luck in life. I went there, I'd hung out in Harlem plenty, so I hung out in Harlem plenty, so I was just used to kind of being around a lot of different kind of people, and just, I don't know why. I just could put out this vibe like people didn't mess with me much. Just like I knew, but this was like fucking, get to go through like Williamsburg, Bushwick, Bed-Stuy, East New York. Those were kind of little slightly dangerous areas back then, and all the buildings was burned out and falling down. But this was like the last part, like the die-hard Italian neighborhood. So, all right, next part of the story. I go out of the place. I'm completely dejected. Okay, I have my stringy, long, reddish brown hair down here. I have my like fucking hot tuna t-shirt or something, and I got my painter's pants on. And I've completely failed with the fucking hippies. The hippies are all snobby. You got to have a 100-watt Marshall amp. You got to have the best drugs. I never had the best drugs. I had like the Puerto Rican nickel bag weed with the seeds and stems in it. I never had the the Humboldt County sense of me. I had like if I could scrape together $5 to get a fucking nickel bag outside the Corso Ballroom, I was lucky, right? So I never had the best drugs unless somebody gave them to me. I never could go on the Dead tour, the best Dead tour. I mean, I didn't really have anything. I had a guitar and an amp and the clothes on my back. That's all I had in the world. And as a kid, right? So I didn't have the best of everything. I wasn't an acid dealer. I didn't have a girlfriend. I was just kind of bereft, of everything. So I'm out in the street, and I'm like, my continual attempts to, you know, be part of this revolution that I heard about in 1967, peace and love and good vibes, and we're going to change the world. Uh, like, just now it's like 10 years later, and I'm just completely met with nothing but rejection and Fleetwood Mac and Peter Frampton and Kiss and Steely Dan and all. I hate fucking classic rock. Okay, so I'm walking down the street, and all of a sudden, these three guys come around the corner, and they all have their hair up in these big spikes, like Sid Vicious, in these leather jackets. Now, when I was a kid, I used to stay with my grandparents a lot, and I used to stay with them a lot because my parents would like split up and get back together, or they'd fight, and we'd be sent to live with my grandparents, and my grandparents were really cool. They were like the fucking coolest people I ever knew. But my grandfather was the dentist at this place, Rome State School, and it was a state school for developmentally disabled people. Some of the people had Down syndrome, some of the people just had various problems, and they all, like, their families couldn't deal with them, and they shipped them off to this place, right? So I grew up partially of my life on the grounds of this like mentally insane institution with all these people around, and they used to give them these haircuts where they would just kind of, these people, they would just kind of hold them down. They would become agitated, like disturbed, so they'd hold them down, and they'd just give them these haircuts, like chop, 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 so their hair would be sticking up all over the place in spikes, right? The other thing is, I didn't know nothing about black leather jackets, except there was a really big gay scene in New York, just huge gay scene, and and the gay guys, they used to have these leather jackets, brown ones, black ones, and it depends on what kind of leather jacket that you wore, what kind of, thing you was looking for, whatever, you know. And so these guys came around the corner, and I kind of like got this holy shit, because, like they had the haircuts from the Rome State School, like, and then they had the black leather jackets on, which I associated with the gay scene. I thought because all these gay guys were wearing them, so I was like, it's mentally insane gay people. Oh, and what are they gonna do to me? Like, holy shit. So, like, when they got a little closer, I realized that they had on like black eyeliner and like chains. They had like these big fucking chains they were carrying, and they had these chains wrapped around their ankles and spurs on and shit. And I realized, holy shit, it's punk rockers, right? And the guy goes, "Hey, how you doing? Hey, that's a nice Fender amp." And it was like, "I'm glad you like it, man, because this band over here, they just wouldn't even let me try out for them because I was playing a Fender amp." And they threw me out of there. I was trying out. I'm looking for a band to join. I want to play rock and roll, and they just threw me out. And the guy goes, "Oh, those fucking assholes. We hate them." He goes, "Oh, that's a nice amp." He says, "Why don't you come with us? We're Pop Tones Incorporated. Hey, my name's Zon." He shook my hand. "My name's Zon. And this is Sid. And this is Arnio." They were like three Italian kids from East New York, right? So we shook hands, and they were like, "Why don't you come on, let's play right now. I'm gonna teach you my songs. You could come play with us." And so they took me in, and I was a hippie. Remember, I had long fucking hair, like, but maybe they seen something in me. Maybe so. And they were all like 14, and I was like 18. I was older than them, and I was like 14. They were like 13 or 14, but I went in, and Zon started playing his guitar, and they started playing, and I was like, "Holy shit, it sounds like the Sex Pistols." And they were like, "All right, you's with us now. You're in our band." So that's how I joined the Pop Tones Incorporated. And and I would be in and out of touch with Zon, because he was just as crazy as me, and he would be bouncing, like he would kind of be with his parents for a while, and we'd do something, and then he would disappear. Nobody had phones back then. It was like, you know, but but that was how I joined the punk movement. And let me tell you, right then and there, man, I went home, and I was like, I got to get rid of all my fucking clothes. I gave myself a fucking shitty haircut in the mirror, and then I went to like the Salvation Army or something. I got a pair of like black waders pants and a white button-down shirt, and I cut my hair so like the Electric Eels, right? So then, boom, instant punk. You know, I stole some of my mother's. When I went to visit my mother, I stole a fucking thing of her eye shadow. So I, you know, like mascaraed myself. And then I started doing shit like cutting myself, you know, and hurting myself so I'd be a punk. So, you know, and then I answered an ad and it was Ivan Julian. The Richard Hell and the Voidoids had broken up, and Ivan Julian was like, I'm starting a band. So I went down there and I tried out for Ivan's band, and I played one song with them. And just like the Poptones, they said, "Okay, you're in." And I was like, "Holy shit!" And I said, "What's our first gig?" And he goes, "Max's." I was like, you know. So I fucking landed in the right spot, man. Thank you, Ivan, because we played like Max's, the Mud Club, CBGB's, fucking Howard Stein's Rock Lounge, the Hurrah. We played, uh, we played, oh man, everywhere. Aldo's Hideaway in New Jersey where I OD'd. I just, everything. So that's how, I went from like, that's how I went from like, I'm going to backtrack my next story tomorrow or something. I'm going to tell you is about Harlem and we're going to go back. But this is the story about how I fucking washed out of classic rock and and classic rock spit me out, man, like a fucking nose booger, and I just went into punk, and I never looked back, man. That was just the life for me, punk rock. Okay, thanks, guys. Love you. Have a good night.